Hello, everybody, and welcome to the July 4th Trips and Traps. Andy Serling, Eric Donovan.
We have 5 races to bring you on. It's a special holiday edition of Trips and Traps, so we'll get things started with the 6th race from June 26th, a state bred 2 and then an optional claim. We're going a mile and turf for fillies and mares.
Obviously, this was a race that was dramatically affected by the number 2 horse, Downtown Hottie, losing the rider. And obviously, the horse is fine because she runs off and finishes in front of the field, and Louis Saya has been riding, so everybody's okay. But things were affected by this. Now, the 1, Ladies Lunar Luck, will get herself into some trouble having nothing to do with the loose horse. The 4, the eventual winner, Whole Lot of Shakin', Jose Lezcano's tremendous job and really overcomes the loose horse for a long time. But one of the reasons she did was a sort of odd ride on the horse who ended up finishing last of the horses with jockeys, Lady Candidate. Lady Candidate was the clear speed in this race, and for whatever reason, the rider of Lady Candidate decided that he didn't want a lead he was being given here. I mean, I don't know what happened to Eric. I
don't know either. You figured, I mean, just looking at him on paper, I mean, Lady Candidate looks like the quicker of the 2 and more of like the lead type than the 2. So, you know, you would think here the pace isn't all that fast early on that the jockey and Lady Candidate would just go on with it.
Yeah, you would, and it would have made the race much different. Now, I'm not saying Lady Candidate would have won. I think the 1 would have won if that happened. Now, at this point, you can't really see, but the loose horse is ranged up 4 wide. You've got the 4 and 5, 1, 2. The 1 is set on the back of the pack. Now, at this point, the rider of Lady Candidate becomes much more aware of the loose horse, and I don't know if he's taking the horse back because of the loose horse, which is a genuine concern and understandable, and I think that's the case here, or if he just didn't seem to want the lead. And I credit Jose Lezcano, who's been riding exceptionally well here, and one of the reasons he's been riding well, Eric, is he's taken advantage of these kind of situations. He took a horse that doesn't have speed, put it in the front end because the actual speed, the rider, for whatever reason, didn't want to have the lead. And I think this very much affects Lady's Lunar Luck because she's well back behind what turns out to be a very, very tepid pace.
I agree. It was a great ride by Lezcano because here he doesn't panic with the loose horse to the outside. I mean, a lot could go wrong here. You know, he's actually letting the loose horse get a little bit of a lead on her here just so that he can, you know, get room enough to go on the outside of her and just a very smart ride there by Lezcano. But, you know, in terms of the, you know, flow of the race, it was definitely affected by the loose horse coming over a little bit and then Junior Alvarado taking back Lady Candidate, and that in turn hurts Ladies Lunar Luck's closing kick.
And Ladies Lunar Luck at this point has gotten a little bit shuffled sort of to the back as well. It lost some more position and made things tougher. You know, this is also an understanding of sort of how horses run as herd animals. Obviously, the loose horse could have run by them, but sort of running in packs, I think on her own without a rider, she doesn't want to go by. And Jose does a remarkable job, lets her go, now gets to the outside, and she's really lost momentum, but she was aided by the slower pace. And it's not clear because as much trouble as she had with the loose horse, the 1 was so dynamics affected in the race that it's hard for me to believe that in a fairly run race she wouldn't have won. And what if the 5 goes to the front? First of all, Lady Candidate goes to the front. I'm not saying she would have won, but speed horses don't rate. And this idea that they can change the running style of a horse, it doesn't work. And you look at a horse like Fort Laramie and what he did when he was given his head in the Stephen Foster. You want to let horses do what they do well. So they took away any chance she had, and they changed the dynamics of the race, and it hurt Ladies Lunar Luck. There's a lot of stuff going on in here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so quick to knock Whole Lot of Shakin', though, because what would have happened, if Lady Candidate went on with the lead, the Whole Lot of Shakin' probably would have just been sitting right behind, and then the loose horse comes up and does that. So, I mean, she still might have been able to win the race anyway.
That's a very, very fair point. Here's my question. If it's a faster pace, though, doesn't the 1 have an even better chance? So I think it's an interesting question. I think the whole thing is open up debate, and obviously the loose horse played a role in there. An interesting race to try to take apart.
All right, our second race on this episode of Chips and Traps is the 8th from June 27th, the starter allowance optional claimer for fillies and mares going 6 furlongs.
This was the day for Quiet Sunshine. If you bet Quiet Sunshine here, you were supposed to cash. She breaks a step slow, and you see her there, and the rider is putting her into a bit of a drive. I don't really understand why, because there was some speed signed on paper in this race, and she was a turn back and didn't figure to be up front. And at this point, she'll just end up getting completely shuffled out of the race as he's riding her and looking for a spot. I think if he had just sort of let her drift back a little bit, she would have drifted back into last on her own, but been in a much, much better position, Eric.
Yeah, I agree. She would have just been sitting back and a lot more comfortable than being ridden along in the early stages and then having to steady, you know, out of the traffic in that pack there as they go around the turn.
And you think of where she is right now, and the eventual winner, Madre Ducavi, is lapped on the eventual 6th place finisher in here, and the 2nd place finisher is sitting a very cozy trip in 4th behind them, and now moving into 3rd. and you compare to where Quiet Sunshine is, widest and farthest back. And considering the run she put in and what it took to get her where she was in the beginning of the race, it's hard to imagine she wasn't best in here.
Yeah, maybe the rider was thinking that since it was a 6 furlong race turning back, that they wanted to ask her for speed out of the gate just so she wouldn't fall too far out of the race. But it ended up backfiring here. As you see, she's got about 4 lengths to make up off the top of the stretch there, and horses that are up on the pace. The pace was pretty slow here. 6 furlongs, they went 23, 46, and 2. So you're going to have to be some horse to close into those fractions.
No, she ran all things relatively considered a fairly remarkable race in relative terms. And the problem is she was a turnback in here. She found the right soft field. The next time she runs, she doesn't rate to have the same kind of spot. The other thing is, I find this as somebody who likes to bet turnbacks, I don't want the second sprint. I want them when they're cutting back from a route to a sprint. And here's an extreme example. Caleb's Posse. How they, we got him as a turn back at Saratoga. And I did win his second sprint. We won the King's Bishop. Then they stretched him out in the Indiana Derby, and it set him up perfectly to turn back to one turn for the Breeders' Cup. I like that turn back angle. I don't know if we make money with Quiet Sunshine going down the road. I think this was the day.
Well, you know what? On the other hand, though, this wasn't that strong a field. I'd imagine she could end up in a race that could look a little bit tougher on paper. That she can kind of fall through the cracks a little bit. I wouldn't say that I would think that you might have a chance to make some money with her if she ends up in the right kind of spot.
In the right kind of spot. I'd have to look at it and evaluate and say, I think if she ran 3 or 4 lengths better in her last start, she could win today. And if I think that's the case and the price is right, you can take her. And all these things are by a case-by-case situation. You have to evaluate this race going to the next one. The worst thing people do as players, and I think we saw it a little bit yesterday with Why Not Whiskey, is they see a horse that they perceive to have a trip, and they just say, wherever the horse runs, we're going to bet on the horse. And these horses get overbet. And sometimes, trouble or not, they're just not good enough.
Oh, you're right about that. You need to keep things in perspective, that's for sure. Third race we'll take a look at now, the 5th from June 28th, the 7-furlong turf race maiden special weight for 3-year-olds. Not a lot going on in this race. Horses, we'll take a look at some different trips from different angles in here. We'll pause it and take a look at 2 horses toward the back in here. The 3 horse who was First Beach, a first-time turfer for Jimmy Jerkins, making his second career start, the first-time start of the 4 Red Vine in the green silks right outside of First Beach.
And then also we'll talk about some horses that end up finishing 1-2 in here as well, Eric.
Yes, we will. The 11 horse who's highlighted toward the outside there, Bonsai Charge, the eventual winner, and up even closer and actually on the pace is the 12 Mongol Boss. And, just an interesting race because, I think you had a quick pace in here. You had horses making middle moves. You had horses toward the back that got left at the gate a little bit, broke a little bit slow, and then, got into a little bit of traffic. The 3 against the 4 kind of closers, in the stretch in here. So I think it's an interesting race to pick apart here. And as they go down the backstretch, you see a 3-ply battle for the lead with the 12-horse Mongol Boss on the outside.
And it's important to note that the race wasn't a total collapse, but it was a relative collapse, as the first and second horses early finished last, 12th, and 11th. And they were 113-1 and 990-1. So one of them did take some money. And this is a race where the favorite was 4-1. So 9-1 isn't a long shot by any stretch. And Mongol Boss is the lone speed horse that held out. So for my money, I'm not sure he didn't run the best race of all, Eric.
I think it's an interesting argument to actually figure out who ran the best race here. And we'll pause it again and highlight the horses. Of course, Mongol Boss on the outside in the lead. The 11-horse Bonsai Charge about to gear up to make a big run around the end of the far turn here with the Frank Reyes, a jockey not all that familiar with. And then toward the back there you have the 3 First Beach, and then way back about 5 lengths behind the First Beach is the number 4 horse Red Vine.
Yeah, an interesting juxtaposition because First Beach, the rider decides to try to save ground as opposed to sort of swinging out a little bit and getting a more clear run. The 4 horse Red Vine gets that more clear run. Red Vine, who makes the wider clear run, has much more running room and therefore ends up closer. And you see First Beach, the gray down the inside. As the rider is maneuvering between, he gets shut off right there. And I think it's a momentum killer, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. It is indeed, especially for a horse with light on experience. Just tough to overcome that, and you have all the momentum there with the 4 Red Vine, who was going to finish in a kind of a blanket finish here with the top 4 finishers. The eventual winner is the 11 Bonsai Charge, who made that middle move around the turn, and the 12 Mongol Boss stayed on pretty well, finished second there, only got beaten in the neck. So it's just an interesting race to see. Who do you want out of the race? Do you want the trouble with the trouble trip with the 3 First Beach? Do you want the horse that was up on the pace the whole way? Do you want the horse that won and made the middle move, or do you want the 4 horse Red Vine, who broke a little bit slowly? For Christophe Clement, it'll be a short price next time out based on the big finishing running line. The way the pace unfolded in here, the way the race kind of relatively collapsed, as you said, I think that's a horse that's kind of going to be a little bit overbet. Not saying that he couldn't win his next start, but probably gets a little bit overbet next time.
Yeah, and I'll give you the next monkey wrench to throw into it. We're going to Saratoga. This was a 7-furlong, one-turn turf race. These horses are either going to be in 5.5-furlong turf sprint races, or they're going to be in mile and a 16th, maybe even a mile and an eighth maiden race around 2 turns. So now you're throwing in that variable of distance and turns, and it really complicates matters. And that's, of course, one of the bigger puzzles as you go from Belmont Park to Saratoga. And it'll be interesting to see where these horses show up. But a fascinating race. My money, I think Mongol Boss ran the best race in here. And I'm wondering if First Beach might not want to try the dirt at 7 furlongs, because I loved his first race in the dirt, and I know you liked that race as well. Not that he ran badly here, but I think they should give him another chance in the dirt.
And that was a very tough race he ran in the dirt.
Tough.
We'll see some horses come out of that race this weekend, but the Eastwood, the winner of that race, is certainly, looks solid.
And he proved his buyer figure. Eastwood 9 points in his second start. I think that's a race that looks better than it does, which is a race, you're right, talking about this Saturday here at Belmont Park.
All right, we'll take a look at another race now. The third race from June 29th, State-bred fillies and mares going a mile on the turf. The habitual slow breaker, the 4 melodramatically back to her old tricks here, getting off about 4 or 5 slow.
Well, we had kind of hoped that melodramatically, as well back there, had gotten over the habits that had plagued her throughout her career. Apparently it's not the case. She had another race where she was much the best, and she caused herself to lose. The 1A Satin Sheiks, she's a bit of a dilemma, because I just think that Jose Lezcano was just massively unlucky in this race. Somebody complaining about his ride afterwards, and I said, I don't think he did anything wrong. He went for the lead. Another horse wanted more. He took back, and he got off the rail. He got in position, and it seemed like every time he turned around, somebody was in front of him and somebody was in his way. I don't know if Satin Sheiks had any horse, though, at the end of the day.
That's my question, too. I'm just not sure how good she was, in this spot. She was a horse that ran pretty well, put together 2 strong races back in the beginning of 2012, had a long layoff, came back in a 7-furlong race, probably needed the race. And, this was the spot you're looking to better. Second back off the layoff, 7 furlong stretching after this race here. The first race was probably a prep. So, here she is. But like you said, I'm not so sure that she's just not the same horse that she was, about a year and a half ago. And I don't know that she's ever going to get back to that.
Well, that's a real question. Can she do her third start? There she is. We'll talk about her in a second. There's melodramatically making her usual, and I can't blame Edgar Prado for this. I mean, this is a horse that makes jockeys look bad. It's like you side on with this horse, and it's like if somebody doesn't understand the horse they're dealing with, they're going to say, oh, what is this rider doing? He broke slow. He's making this premature, big, wide run here. She's just the kind of horse that must drive riders crazy in these spots. And I guess you could say Edgar could have tried to rate her, but I imagine if he tried to rate her too much, she probably ends up sulking or something in here. But boy, she ran well.
She did run well. This was her first start against Allowance folks too. It took her a long time to break her maiden, 11 starts, and she finally got the maiden to plumb off the layoff there. And then toward the back, you see the 1A.
Keep in mind Satin Sheiks, because she is getting shuffled. You see Jose's back to the inside here, and he's got nowhere to go. The one thing I'll say about Satin Sheiks, Eric, is maybe she got discouraged because she got habitually put in that spot. I'm not trying to make excuses for her. In fact, I want to just toss her from future bets, but I'm not quite sure. She certainly didn't have a fair chance here.
No, she didn't. I mean, I would have liked to seen her finish up with a little something more. I mean, she wasn't in traffic the whole stretch, but I could see how I could see how it could be discouraging, and then you just kind of give up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know, but melodramatically, I mean, the problem with melodramatically is, and listen, you're talking to the major idiot who's lost money on her a number of times, is you keep falling for these trips and going, she's just going to do it every time. She may end up winning a race, but in general, she's just a piece of candy that you don't want to pick up off the table.
It's a good analogy right there. One more race to bring you on Trips and Traps. We'll take a look at the division of the Stallion Stakes run here on Sunday. The 3 West Hills Giant putting in a superb effort. The 5, rather.
Sometimes we like to just show a horse that won that's not going to change the world. And here's West Hill Giant. The first thing is, I didn't realize this. He gets completely left here, and I mean, he breaks slow. And you watch the head on. It was just his own fault. He stood in the gate. He gets shuffled back to dead last. He just cruises up. You're going to see him just cruise up on his own with Edgar. Edgar waits, and then he says around the 3/8 pole to 5/16 pole, I don't want to wait any longer, and he just sends this horse wide. He swoops the field, opens up in the stretch. I thought, Eric, this was a much more impressive effort than it looked on when you watched the first time. It looks on paper, and it was a pretty impressive effort even in that.
Well, you're expecting him to win because he's the favorite, and he looks like the horse to beat in here. But he, made about a 5 or 6 length move down the backstretch to get to where he is now.
Yeah, no, this is a horse that can run, and you look at another situation though. 7 furlongs in the turf at Belmont Park. What does he do at Saratoga? Well, he has one going long in the turf. He ran second to Gotham going long in the dirt. I mean, this is a pretty cool New York bred, and you see him outside in about 6th or 7th there, and this is the point where Edgar says, okay, I'm just going to go, and I'm going to end this race. But this this is also the kind of move that mere mortal horses make, and it kills their chances. And this is a horse that got left and shuffled back to last. This was some performance.
He had every right to just kind of idle after this point, or kind of eke this one out. But that's not the case. A clear and decisive victory for West Hills Giant, who stumbled pretty badly at the start of the Mike Lee. I wonder with those other two races coming up, if they try to get him back on that. When's the New York Derby? Do you know?
Well, the New York Derby's coming up pretty soon. There is, I think, a stallion stake at Saratoga, a mile on the turf, where I have to think they're looking at that. Okay. And if there's ample time between that and the Albany, I wouldn't be surprised if they take it. And he wasn't beating any killers here, but this is a performance that I think the final margin and everything belies how well this horse ran. I like this horse.
Yeah, he could have at least easily doubled the margin. There was a 3.5 at that the wire there, probably.
He got a figure in the low 80s, 81, 82. I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest a horse that in reasonable 90s. Circumstances. Well, he could run a 90 at this point. And don't forget, he's a 3-year-old in the middle of his 3-year-old season. But he's going to have to start getting out of the gate, Eric, because he's got some gate issues, and he's going to have to start breaking cleanly.
No, that's a good point. And that's going to put him behind the 8 ball, especially when he runs against better horses.
Right. I mean, in this situation, he wouldn't have won if the field was a little tougher. Anyway, we can always use your help. We won't be back on until we're in Saratoga. But that address is trips and traps at NYRAinc.com.
Thanks for watching.